Hi, this is Troy Hunt, and welcome to Introduction to UniFi. This is a short course about Ubiquiti's UniFi product line, and it's all about why you should choose UniFi, what the UniFi product line actually does, how to design a UniFi network, and then eventually we'll actually go and install a network. And I'm going to walk you through that step by step. So this course will take you from zero knowledge to a fully working network in your home or commercial environment. It's not going to be a deep course. We're going to focus instead on the fundamentals. And you'll see three themes appearing over and over again throughout the course. One of them is about the increasing need for Wi-Fi everywhere. Ubiquitous Wi-Fi, if you like. The other is about how Ubiquiti's UniFi suite of products is a very modular design. So I'm going to talk a lot about modularity. And then thirdly, you're going to see how a UniFi environment has a very centralized control structure. So I'm going to talk about the unified experience of the UniFi product suite. So that's it for a very brief intro. Let's go and jump into it. Very quickly about me first. As I mentioned, I am Troy Hunt. I do a lot of training and speaking on various aspects of technology. And as you can see here, I am also a happy UniFi customer. And much of what you see here in this course is based on my own experiences, having gone out and bought the products to build out my own network and subsequently networks for other people because I was so happy with the product. You can find me on Twitter at Troy Hunt or via my website, which is troyhunt.com. Let's now move on and start talking about why you would choose UniFi. Ubiquiti actually sells more access points than any other company in the world, so that should give you a bit of a sense of how popular their products actually are. But what I want to talk about is why we need them in the first place. So why is Wi-Fi becoming so important, and what are some of the problems with it at present that we're trying to solve? Let's start by looking at the home. When you look around the average home these days, you realize that there are a lot of connected devices. Now, we've had things like PCs for quite some time, and inevitably they were one of the first things we connected to Wi-Fi. Smartphones and indeed tablets are obviously also very common. But increasingly, we're seeing other devices become part of the home network. IoT devices, such as voice-controlled smart speakers. Smart TVs are becoming enormously prevalent, simply because we're seeing so many apps on the TVs that actually need internet connectivity. We're seeing a lot of IoT in healthcare. Smart scales are a good example. I have a set of these myself. And we're even seeing IoT reach into the garden via the likes of Wi-Fi connected irrigation systems. Now, connected devices go well beyond just these I've shown on the screen, but I picked these because they illustrate something else as well. When you look at devices such as the PC and the phone, we expect them to work everywhere. We want to be able to move around the house and still have connectivity. A device like the smart speaker you might place in the kitchen. So now you need a decent connection in a room of the house where you never really needed a connection before. The living room is where you might find your smart TV, so we need Wi-Fi there too. Obviously, something like the scales are going to go into the bathroom. And that's one room of the house where we haven't traditionally expected to have a good connection. And of course, if you have a Wi-Fi connected irrigation system, it's going to be outdoors. So you see the challenge here. We've got more and more devices than ever, but they're also in more rooms of the house, and even outside the house, than what we've ever had before. So we're entering this era where we need ubiquitous connectivity everywhere in order for these devices to even function properly in the first place. Now, when you consider the spread of these devices in the home, also have a think about where you've typically had a Wi-Fi access point. Because what has become the norm over the years is that the internet comes into the house in one particular location, and there is a device there, frequently an all-in-one device, which plugs into that internet and makes the Wi-Fi available. Now that might be in the home office, which could be at the other end of the house, to the bathroom, or to the kitchen, or to any one of these other places you see here where you actually need Wi-Fi today. So you can see the challenge we're facing. It's not just the number of devices we have, it's the varying locations in which we place them. Now that's just in the house. Let's move on to commercial. And indeed, something that's increasingly becoming an implicit expectation now in a commercial premise is having Wi-Fi available. So a coffee shop is a great example. This is probably the premier place where people would expect to have Wi-Fi, because people expect to be able to go there and work whilst they sip their latte. And that means not just having a Wi-Fi connection in the first place, but actually having a decent Wi-Fi connection as well. And that means that someone like you or I expect to be able to go to the cafe and work and still be productive if there's 20 other people there trying to do exactly the same thing. Now there's all sorts of things that can make it very hard to work via Wi-Fi in a cafe. Not just the number of other people in that cafe trying to use the same connection, but just like in the connected household, where is that access point sitting? Is it just the one unit secreted behind a desk somewhere that could be quite some distance from many of the people who actually need to use it? In many cases, that one unit has been there for many years, even as the number of connected devices wandering into that cafe at any one given time has increased dramatically. Now, it's certainly not just cafes either. We're seeing Wi-Fi expand to all sorts of different locations. For example, outdoor locations. You might be at, say, a university campus and wanting to be able to work outside, which again brings us back to the expected ubiquity of Wi-Fi. Are you actually going to be able to get a connection out there in the middle of the square? Or going back to the commercial sense for a moment, what about stadiums? We're seeing environments here where there could be 100,000 people flooding into an environment like a football stadium, and increasingly Wi-Fi is becoming important to them. It's not just important to the patrons either. It's important for the likes of the football stadium managers, because Wi-Fi is increasingly a value add. More people will come to the event or to the cafe or the restaurant or the shopping centre if they know they have free connectivity. And then whilst they're there, they'll share the experiences they have more freely. Many organisations actually see this as free marketing. If they can make connectivity available to their patrons, then their facility is going to be checked into more, tagged more, and shared more just by virtue of them providing free connectivity. Another angle to this as well is that commercial entities are increasingly seeing free Wi-Fi as a means of understanding who their customers are, because they've now got people coming to their premises and connecting. And that gives the organisation an opportunity to better understand how many people are visiting, what services they're using, and how they can better support their customers. So let's start talking about how UniFi helps achieve those objectives, not just in the home or the coffee shop or a football stadium, but everywhere. So what is this UniFi product suite? One of the core principles of the UniFi system is that it's a centralized, consistent experience. And it's the same experience whether you're setting up a network in a one-bedroom flat or whether you're running it in a large hotel. Now, the great thing about this is that all the features that the professionals get in that large commercial environment are available to the same folks who want to run it in a cafe or in a residential home. Now, of course, you wouldn't have the same hardware in those two extreme environments, but let's go and touch on that hardware for a moment. Because one of the great things about the UniFi product suite is that it's broken down into different units of different scale, and then you choose the ones that are right for your environment. So we're going to be talking about all of the units that you see on the screen at the moment. And we're going to cover what environments they make sense in. So when you come to the point where you're building a UniFi environment, you get to pick and choose the bits that work best for your deployment. And again, whether you choose the smallest possible deployment in, say, that one-bedroom flat, and I'll give you an example of that later on, or a very large deployment like in that stadium, you're still going to be choosing many of the parts you see in front of you here. It's just that you're going to use a lot more of them in the larger deployment. All of these devices surface themselves through the same central controller. You have the same experience with them. And there are other products beyond this in the UniFi suite as well. So products such as video and VoIP. And again, they surface themselves back into the same consistent user experience. And to give you a sense of what that experience looks like, later on, we're going to see the UniFi controller. And it's a web-based controller that gives you complete visibility into everything that's happening in your network. It lets you understand where you have coverage within your environment, and indeed where you might have dead spots. It also helps you understand how devices such as wireless access points are performing, who's using them, how well utilized are they. And all of this information sits here in this one user experience that's consistent across every scale of deployment. Now, clearly, when we are talking about this broad spectrum of possible use cases, you're appealing to very different audiences who may be interested in actually rolling out these networks. So let's spend a moment talking about who UniFi is for. And I want to talk primarily about two different groups. Now, one of these is people like myself, prosumers. So this is people who ultimately want to use it in a consumer-based environment, such as in my home, but may not be network professionals, which I am not. But I'm a technical guy, and a product like UniFi actually makes a lot of sense for the things I do. So I'm certainly one of the demographics for which UniFi makes a lot of sense. The other demographic is, of course, professionals. So these are the folks who are actually rolling these out into large corporate-style environments. So I mentioned things like stadiums and hotels. These are people who live and breathe networking. But the great thing about the UniFi product suite is that it works equally well across both of them, and again, surfaces so many of those powerful features to everyone. What I love about this being in the prosumer category is I get so much of the stuff that the professionals get in those really big rollouts. And certainly there are features that I don't even need in my house, but if I ever have the desire, they're easily accessible. Now there's just one more thing I want to talk about in this first module, and it's to address another demographic that's not mentioned here, and that's your consumer demographic. So let's talk briefly about Amplify. Amplify is a great turnkey solution for consumers. So this is the sorts of folks who may not be technical. They just want to buy a device, plug it in, and have a network. And that's precisely what Amplify does. Now this consists of an Amplify router base station, and that's the little square unit you see here. That has both built-in Wi-Fi and some physical Ethernet jacks. It's then complemented by Amplify mesh points, and it ships with two of them. So you have these two units that you can place in other rooms around the house where you'd like to have Wi-Fi available. And they create a mesh Wi-Fi network so that you can extend Wi-Fi to different parts of your house, but do so in a very plug-and-play style fashion. So this is a great solution for those who want to just go and buy a turnkey product. But this course is about UniFi, so let's move on and start talking about the UniFi product line.